Introducing Nose to Tail, a podcast where we explore the world of aviation lifecycle solutions, insights, and more. Presented by Jet Midwest.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Nose to Tail podcast. I'm Patrick Kraus with Jet Midwest. I'm here with Greg. Greg, how you doing?
Doing great.
All of our podcast listeners out there are always interested in people's aviation background and their history. So if you maybe give us a little bit of your background and how your career is going.
Well, actually started by accident almost 25 years ago. I was working in the lumber industry for my dad, and he passed away suddenly. And like any typical Cuban dad, always had his thumb on my throat, and I really didn't learn a whole lot. So when he passed away, I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do. So I was living down at the beach, bartending, and a gentleman and his wife would come in 3 or 4 nights a week. Pretty expensive restaurant. Yeah, as soon as I waited on him one time, he really gave me $100 tips. I was like, every time this guy comes in, I'm going to get him. A couple of weeks go by, I just happened to be in there at the restaurant on my off night eating dinner, and he walks in and says, you've been bringing us food and drinks, let me buy your food and dinner tonight. I was like, okay. So I joined him. So very unassuming guy, ball cap, said Air Ink on it, Air Ink polo shirt, blue jeans, black sneakers. Didn't know what Air Ink was, never asked. So we got to talking, and he's like, so are you in college? I said, well, I finished that about 4 years ago. And he's like, well, why are you working here? And I gave him the story about my dad, and he's like, so what are you looking at doing? I was like any other guy, pharmaceutical sales, software. He goes, you ever considered aviation? I was like, no. So he says, well, come down to the plant, over in Fairhope, and I'll show you around, see what you think. So set up, go over there and talk to him, and he shows me all this massive equipment and walks me through. He goes, what do you think? I said, it's Chinese to me. I said, the most I've done with airplane is get on one, get off one, or a kite tail. He goes, you'll pick it up. This is easy. And he goes, so if you want a job, I'll hire you in customer service. I said, okay. So I come with a desk and a computer and gets me out of the bar scene. He goes, absolutely. I said, okay, I'll take it. So all excited, get in the car. I didn't even ask what the job paid. He just told me that I'd go a long way in this industry. Said, you got the gift of gab. I was about 100 pounds lighter back then, so I was better looking back than I am now. But I accepted the job, and he says, well, you can't start till December. And I was like, well, this is July. I was like, well, why is that? He's like, well, I'm selling the company. The new owner takes over on December 4th, and this is December 4th, 2000. He goes, so that'll be your first day. I said, okay. He goes, in the interim, if you want to make some extra money, I've got this side gig that I'm doing down here. I got a warehouse full of surplus material, which I had no idea what that was. So he goes, meet me here on this Monday. So, okay. So I go to his little warehouse office on Monday, and he shows me all these boxes of piece parts and 8130s, which of course I didn't know what any of that was. He goes, need you to build some racks. Need you to organize these in chronological order, get the 8130s, upload all this onto the ILS. I was like, okay, don't know what the ILS is either. He goes, I'll meet you here next Monday. So week goes by. I show up Monday, 7 o'clock in the morning. Note on the office door says keys on the map. Grab the key, go inside. There's keys to his truck because he knew I didn't have one, and $5,000 in $100 bills. He goes, here's my address. Come get my truck and trailer. Go to Lowe's, build the racks. Call me when you get done. Okay. So I go do that and go to his house, get his truck trailer, go to Lowe's. I call him 2 to 3 weeks later. He said, hey, Mr. Waters, I'm done. He goes, there's no way you're done and did it correctly. I'll be down there in a minute. He comes around, looks, he goes, well, I got some good news and some bad news. I was like, all right, what's the good news? He goes, I hired a trustworthy kid because most kids in your situation you're in, would have taken my $5,000 and stole my truck and trailer, and I'd never see it again. So the good news is I hired a good guy. I said, well, what's the bad news? He goes, this would have taken most people 6 months at $10 an hour. You did it in 3 weeks. So you fucked yourself out of, basically 5 months of $10 an hour work. So he gave me an opportunity, took a chance on me. I went on to work with the new owner.
Just to back up, obviously great opportunity and a story not too dissimilar to the start of Jet Midwest. So then you start your career at Air Ink. Maybe it'd give people an idea of what Air Ink was about.
Air Ink was always customer centric, which, my company today, Aerostar, if somebody says, what do you sell? We're selling customer service. I mean, we always answer the phone. Just comparing to where it was 25 years ago to where it is today, I think it was honestly, wasn't as cutthroat back then. I don't know how he made margins or money at the labor rates we were quoting, because we're roughly about the same size company. And if I charge the same labor rate today, we'd be out of business in a hurry. The people were genuinely nice back then. They still are today. Where I was 29 getting back in the industry, I was always the youngest guy in the room. Just out in Phoenix last week at the Turbo Golf event, and we hosted a lunch, and I had 19-year-olds showing up this thing. I was like, the new age, the new revolution of kids is coming through. And so they're all asking me for advice and how to handle certain situations. But so now that's kind of compared to then to where it is today. Obviously, lots of changes, going through 9/11, financial crisis in the late 2000s, and obviously with COVID. I don't think anybody had dealt with those challenges prior to 2000, at least not that I was aware of.
So where did you go from there? So you went from Air Ink.
I worked for Air Ink for 2000. I believe we were acquired in 2005 by Focus Services. They're about a year and a half, maybe 2 years Mark Lee, who was the owner of Air Inc. at the time, bought it from Stan. He had promoted me to vice president of marketing and sales, which was a personal goal of mine that I told him that I want to take over that. So he quickly gave me a lot of rope to hang myself, sent me to all over the world. I went to Singapore, Paris Air Show, Farnborough, places I never dreamed I'd ever go, much less somebody else put me on their dime to do that. Or I got approached by Fokker. We're coming up, so they want to come see us when the sun's work. Well, little did I know it was a buy session to come up see our facility, and because they'd scheduled like 8 months out. I was like, well, all right, well, whatever. I'll see you in December. So sure enough, December, these two guys called from Nolans. Hey, we'll be over in 2 weeks if that's good with you. I said, okay. Went and picked them up, and I just bought a little Infinity G37 with my newfound money from this job. I got to pick these guys up for dinner, and I don't know if you've spent much time in the Netherlands, but Dutch people are really tall.
Yes, they are.
So these two guys were pushing 7 feet. I was like, I don't know how that's going to fit in my little car, but we managed. Went and had a little Italian dinner, took them through the shop the following day. They looked around, asked a bunch of questions, mainly about test equipment. It's like, all right, well, you're not really asking about a price or anything like that, but whatever, have at it. So shortly thereafter, they called me to come over to the Netherlands, see their facility. So I said, well, whatever you got to do, go do it. So fly over there. Then they come back, and then they asked me and my boss to go over there. So he and I both fly over. As soon as we get there this time, they take him one direction, they take me another direction and put us in like these interrogation rooms. We're there for about 8 hours. And we come out, hair's all like we've just been interrogated and asking all these questions. And we immediately both said, they want to buy us. We called Mark Lee, the owner of Air Inc., and said, this is what's going on. He's like, well, not really wanting to sell, but if you guys think it's a good idea, I'll entertain it. So he made us do all the due diligence on the sales. Each person in the department, Mark was kind of hands off with all that. So great learning experience for me. Made a decision. He told them no, I think 2 or 3 times before they finally agreed. So then I became part of the Dutch Army in sales, kind of worked for their corporate level at 6 or 7 guys. So after that, they bought Airtron Air Power, part of their roadmap to expand in North America. Fast forward 4 years, I wasn't going anywhere. I got passed over for a few promotions. They said I didn't have high enough contacts at VP levels with airlines. I was like, the VPs aren't making all these decisions. They're not in the trenches, but whatever. So I hired a gentleman from GE, and it's like, all right, I wasn't real happy about that. So he calls me, comes down to Fairhope, Alabama, and says, we need to have a meeting. I was just sending an agenda. And so we're sitting there. He's like, well, tell me about your accounts. And so, of course, what's about accident? I'll tell you. He goes, get done. He goes, great. You need to set up meetings with all these VPs so I can meet them. I was like, they told me you got this job because you had all the contacts with your GE pedigree. And that's why I didn't. He goes, I know these guys. So that just kind of pushed me over the edge. Me and my neighbor, who are now business partners, he kind of hit his ceiling. I'd hit my ceiling. And it's like, well, I know how to run a repair station. I think we're going to make a bunch of money. So over about probably a case and a half of beer at our community pool, we came up with Aerostar, created a business plan, and went and talked to a couple people that are my business partners. We created Aerostar and launched June of 2011. And so it was me. I poached my VP of operations, Frank Lechesky from Fokker, Director of Quality, Patrick Kickler from Fokker. It's kind of funny the way I poached Frank. We were doing a customer appreciation event down in Gulf Shores. So they used to have the powerboat races, and this was right after the BP oil spill. And I lived down there, so talked to the powers that be at Fokker, said, let's bring some airlines down. We can get a cheap rate on a condo. They'll throw in concert tickets, and we get to watch powerboat races. So we go down there, call Frank and Donna, who work for me today, and said, hey, I need y'all's help managing this customer event. Part of this, Bon Jovi was playing in concert one night. We had some range buses to take us down. As we're walking down the beach to the concert, I said, hey, Frank, here's what I'm doing, man. And he goes, I said, are you in? He goes, dude, you're the only one I'd leave this company for. I'm in. And so that was all it took, was a couple beers, a Bon Jovi concert to do that. But
well, I can definitely tell you, after hearing the story, I know that if I just show up with a case of beer, me and you are going to find a way to get into a partnership together.
Yeah,
because that's a great journey to get into.
Yeah.
So obviously, Fokker Services as an OEM had a very niche market in their own product lines. I know they worked in other product lines in terms of the repair side. Were you guys in the Fokker component market at Air Inc. at the time? Was that part of why they were attracted to you guys? Or what was it that really instigated those guys to take that step?
I think because they thought they could afford us, to be honest with you. I know who they went after first, which I won't say. It was a much larger company. The guy that owned that company just wanted too many demands. And I think with our owner, Mark Lee, at the time, he not only owned Air Inc., he owned a handful of other companies. He was West Coast based. We were there in Alabama. So I think Fokker probably thought, oh, these guys are in Alabama. They don't know what they're doing. We can probably steal this company away. But Mark's very smart financially. They gave him a good deal, and I guess he couldn't refuse it. But even though things didn't work out for me for Fokker, but remember, to go back to your original question, I think we do the F-100 air cycle machine. So I really don't think that was what they were interested in, our Fokker capabilities. It was more sort of what else could we do, because they were trying to build a footprint. So I think they were trying to go after the CRJ 200 type certificate ship holdership. Then they were going to go to the 700s, 900s, then A320s. then eventually 737s, and just rebrand in North America because they knew the Fokker was a dying fleet. So this was their way of reinventing themselves. Problem is, they had plans to buy, I think, 5 repair stations. They stopped at 2. Not sure what all changed besides ownership and stocks over of Mullins, but it just never materialized.
We did, Jet Midwest was really big into the Fokker 100 market. Early on, we were the first people to ever tear one down. Obviously, it's a very different customer base, right? Because you have so few airplanes. You have 278 airplanes, something in that range, that were manufactured. It was definitely a niche market for us, and we really struggled to find MROs. And so we actually had a very robust relationship with Fokker Services. It can be challenging to deal with, the Dutch or their, I want to say cagey is maybe not a fair way to put it. They certainly were very challenging to do business with. It was not like doing business with someone they could go sit down and have a couple cold beers with, and we could just hash out how to make this thing work great. It just didn't work that way. It was a very engineering process, unbelievably in-depth, thoughtful on everything, which is probably why they were challenged to maybe get more than a couple repair stations, because I won't say they overthink it, but they might have overthought it a little bit. So now you've got Aerostar. What was your key product line when you started? And then what's that vision been in the last 13, almost 14 years now?
It's definitely had to evolve. So my business partners at the time didn't know anything about 145 repair station. The approach I took, I had my customer base, which was FedEx and Delta. But when I was at Fokker, those were 2 of my key accounts. Just like everybody else, we're friends in this industry. So I went and told them, it's like, look, I'm thinking about leaving and start my own deal. I'm not going to do this without your support, though. So, what are your thoughts? And they're like, nothing wrong with Fokker, but we buy from you. You always stand behind what you say you're going to do, and you do what you do. We buy from Greg Guzman at the end of the day. So if you go do this and you get all your paperwork, your certificates, we'll send the audit team down and we'll get you going. And sure enough, I did that. We launched in June. Shortly thereafter, Fokker closed down the airing facility in Fairhope. That was, I think, around October. So I was in a position to hire a bunch of technicians then, but we took some in at a lesser rate just to keep them employed and get insurance and all that kind of jazz. Like I said, without the Delta guys and the FedEx guys helping me out here in the first few months, back then, if you could get approved by FedEx, much less than pull it off in 3 months like I did, it's golden, still is golden day to day. Delta auditors showed up. I think we had the doors open for 2.5 months. I'm not going to say the level 3 case auditor's name, but he showed up. He goes, you guys even opened yet? So I was calling in favors. He showed up, stayed there for 2 days. He goes, have you even turned apart yet? I'm like, no. We had a bead blaster, wasn't calibrated. And Frank went off on it's like, you find me 1 CMM, says this bead blaster has to be calibrated, and I'll agree with you. So he took it upon himself to call Delta on a manual. He finally found one in about 36 hours. Dinged us on that. And I said, all right, that's easy fix. And then we had 2 first-class seats in our lobby, clear said Aerostar logo chairs. We didn't have a red tag on. Dinged us for that. I said, all right, I can fix this real quick. I said, do you have to come back or can I just send you some documentation? He goes, I'll be back at 6 months. I was like, you can't take 6 months for this. Faster than he finally said, fine, send me a picture of your Cal sticker and a red tag and you're good to go. So he pulled that off.
Really is. This is the foundational stuff, right, to start the company. And that's an awesome audit story because when we started our paint shops, our 145, when I very first opened, at very similar time period, 2010, man, we could change the light bulb and I could paint an airplane. That was about it. We were going through audits with airlines because they had audited us to put us on for paint. I was getting audited, every 6 weeks. And I learned very quickly that this is not your mom coming to check on your room after you tried to clean it, right? So every problem that you had, you really had to solve. There was no hiding anything. And, I have a big place, so it's really easy for people, well, we'll just take all this stuff and move it. And I go, sort of like your chair. It's like, no, just put the right tags on them and they'll be fine. And so we really learned how to get through that audit process. And it made all of our systems better and made us stronger. And you embrace what that's about. And you're correct. Sometimes they're fighting they have to find something. Of course, even if you were perfect, they would find something. And you kind of hope they find something easy and not something complicated. I can empathize with that process, but it's a great process at the beginning to go through because you don't have 10 years or 15 years worth of oopsies hanging out in your building that you didn't take care of.
We'll continue this discussion on the next episode of Nose to Tail, a podcast presented by Jet Midwest. Don't forget to please like and subscribe to our channel.